We have a number of questions in the chat box. And the first question is there from Professor Kumaraswamy. So may I invite him to ask his question directly?
Thanks, Ambassador. It's delightful to hear you the details which are not normally available. Let me just put two questions, for want of time. India did not issue any travel advisory for Syria until very late. And, perhaps if my memory serves me right, it's somewhere around 2012 late we issued a travel advisory, not before that. Can you explain why the reluctance? That's a question number one. And the second question is, since you said you are able to meet people very freely, is there anything Indian Foreign Office can learn from the Syrian Foreign Ministry? Because learning is always a two-way process. What the Syrian learn is their problem. But is there anything we can learn how the Syrian Foreign Ministry is structured, is operating or functioning? Is there anything we can learn? Thanks, Ambassador.
Thank you. First, about the travel advisory. Yes, you are right. Obviously, people watching the television channels here, international television channels, were under the impression that the entire country was up in flames. It was not so. Okay, it was all exaggerated sort of reporting. It was all sometimes fiction, fabricated sort of reporting that was indulged in by these channels with a specific purpose to arouse the people against to get the people to agitate against the government. So the situation was not such that as to necessitate a travel advisory. Number one. Number two, the number of Indians coming to Syria are very few. Primarily business people who anyway used to contact the embassy and ask whether it is safe to travel. And we, wherever we used to ask them where they wanted to go to. Then depending on that, we used to give a response, whether it is okay or not. Number three is, on our own, the embassy used to contact people who were in isolated places and give them suitable advice, whatever, depending on the situation. Like, for example, after the Jasharil Shagor incident in June or so 2011, there were three senior managers at GM, general manager level, working in a sugar factory on the outskirts of the city. We contacted them, we contacted their factory owner and requested him to arrange for them to be, to get them out safely from that place. We got them to Aleppo and we managed to speak to we got our Honorary Consul General to speak to the local authorities to issue them necessary exit documents because they didn't have all the papers. They did it within half an hour. And they were safely taken out. Like this, we have done a few things. About the travel advisory, yes, towards the end of that year, when things started, deteriorating, this was when all this armed people started coming in large numbers. Otherwise, they were there even from the earliest days of the unrest. We issued the first travel advisory. This was on January 7th, 2012. And it only said, it advised people to avoid all non-essential travel to Syria. So a few people used to come, but in any case, there were not many people coming. And then a little later, even the direct flights to Syria from the Gulf were stopped, so hardly anyone was coming. A similar advisory was issued on May 29th. Following an incident at the Iraq-Syria border in which 2 Indians were killed. Of course, they were not the targets, but the fact remains that 2 Indians were killed. So referring to that tragic incident, Indians were again advised to avoid all non-essential travel. But the third and more important travel advisory came on the 20th of July, 2012. That was when, rather soon after, maybe a day or two before that, a major incident took place in the heart of Damascus. There is a security coordination group which is responsible for organizing and coordinating responses to terrorist activities all over Syria. This is headed by Assistant Vice President, included Defense Minister, included Interior Minister, included the Chief of Intelligence, Deputy Defense Minister, etc. Now, the room in which they were to meet, somebody had, planted a bomb that went off when I think 80% of the regular attendees were there, killing the Defense Minister, killing the Assistant Vice President, Deputy Defense Minister, and one or two others as well. When this happened in the heart of Syria, heart of Damascus, and that too, if this is, I mean, if the security coordination group could be targeted, then we thought it is not safe for Indians to travel. And also the Defense Ministry, which is just about a kilometer from the, not even a kilometer from the embassy, that was attacked and burned down by the terrorists. It's around 7:38 or so in the morning. So taking all these situations into account, after that incident, a bomb blast took place. We issued an advisory asking all Indian nationals to avoid all travel until further notification. So yes, we did it in July, but not in the initial stage, because in our assessment, the situation was not bad to warrant issue of an advisory. About the other point, one major point that I learned from Syrian Foreign Office, in fact, it's a negative thing in the sense that when all this was happening, yes, they were briefing, initial stages, they were briefing the diplomatic community. They used to convene meetings with diplomatic community to brief them on the security situation and what's happening, etc., etc. Then they, it wasn't, I think, delivering anything to them, because of which the frequency became less. Then they started meeting IPSA ambassadors, because we were members of, incidentally, all the three IPSA countries were members of UN Security Council at that time. Because of it, they used to call us and brief us on what's happening, and also as and when issues used to come up in the UN Security Council in Syria. But they did not do anything to stop they did not give a counter to all that was being reported by the international media. I had repeatedly taken up with them as to why are you not doing it? I mean, when they are saying this thing has happened and when it has not happened, at least major events, you counter them. I mean, whether they agree with you or not, whether they report or not, make an effort. They didn't. They, of course, they made a feeble attempts initially, but after they told me, they don't listen to us and they report whatever they want, and whatever we say also will be twisted and put out in the media. So we want to avoid that. So they completely shunned international media. Though many of them were operating there, but there was nobody from the government side briefing them on what the government thinks of the situation or what exactly happened in a particular incident, etc. So that is a big thing that I learned from there, that we should never repeat it. We should not do it. If anything happens, whether they agree with you or not, whether they report correctly what you say or not, I think you should repeat we should keep the media informed all the time. That's a big lesson for me. In fact, I used to keep repeating it in my dispatches to the ministry.
May I now request Dr. Samina Hamid to pose a question herself?
Thank you for that opportunity. Thank you, Ambassador Haran, for that finer prints of the relation, India-Syria relations. I'm interested to know there was a collaboration with India and China, ONGC and Chinese CNPC, in a region near the Euphrates in Syria, in petroleum. And so given our dispensation towards China, especially in an area of energy security, it is interesting to know how this collaboration came about. So what would be your take on that? I believe that I can understand that much of the groundwork would have been done in your regime. Thank you.
Well, please don't call it my regime.
Sorry,
During my tenure.
sorry. Your tenure. Sorry.
Okay. You're right. It happened long before I went there. At that time, I think every country was on the lookout for investing in, energy resources, basically as a measure of shoring up their own energy security. This was the context in which, Petro-Canada was offering the 37% share in Al-Furat Petroleum Company, about which I mentioned during my presentation also. You're right. It is near the Al-Furat River, the Euphrates River, just across the river from Deir ez-Zor, about 30-40 kilometers. I mean, spread over a large area. So when that was up in the thing, I mean, by that time, actually, to be frank, the majority of the oil has been already extracted. It was not producing that much oil, because of which Petro-Canada wanted to exit. But both the Chinese company and ONGC Videsh Limited thought that it would be worthwhile still to invest in that thing. They did invest, and it is purely a commercial deal, nothing political in it. And we, unfortunately, they got back their money well in time before all the trouble started. After the trouble started, now the company is being operated. The oil wells are being operated by the opposition side, and the crude is going elsewhere, as you may be knowing already. In fact, there are reports that it's heading north. There are reports that it is the American contractors are taking it to Iraq. I don't know what happens to it after that.
Thank you. We have with us Professor Kechichian, who has a question next. I request Professor Kechichian to just introduce himself to Ambassador Haran, and then maybe pose his question.
Thank you, Ambassador Singh. It's very kind of you. I am a senior fellow at the King Faisal Center in Riyadh, and a researcher who is interested in this part of the world. And of course, since I am most of the time nowadays in Lebanon, Syria is a very critical country. And I have actually a serious question to ask you about how you dealt with the dictatorship. But before I ask that, I have a technical question based on your remarks. Even before that, I have something else that I wanted to mention. Ambassador Singh got my ideas all wrapped up by asking me to introduce myself. I really appreciated your presentation, and I hope that you, as a diplomat, as a retired diplomat, will write your memoirs, because it is so important that the world benefit from the experience of diplomats like yourself, who have been in situation where a lot of important developments occurred, and history should not forget that. So that's my plea. The technical question is the following. When you were ambassador, Syria promised to the United Nations Security Council, if my memory does not betray me, at that time, the Secretary General was Kofi Annan, and he visited Damascus a number of times, and the Syrian dictatorship promised that they would go ahead and deal with the situation. In fact, there was even a peacekeeping mission that was put together, about 200 people. I forget the name of the general, General Mood or Moody or some.
You're absolutely right. It is General Mood.
Exactly. And of course, nothing happened, because the Syrians made a lot of promises and then they reneged on their promises. So my question, the serious question that I would like to pose, is the following. There was an uprising after 1970, really, when the dictatorship came to power. There were uprisings several times before the latest developments, and every time these were crushed. Syria is a dictatorship as if, and has no parallel really today in the world. It is one of the best dictatorships around. It has assassinated, literally, and I'm measuring my words, over 500,000 people, of its own people. And the world is still watching and hoping that things will happen. Negotiations are taking place. What did you think when you were ambassador, when you were dealing with a regime that was so unresponsive to its own population? And how did you stomach them?
Okay, now I'll be able to answer it only in respect to the period I was there, because I don't know what happened before that. I'd only heard about, I read about it. I have not, I really don't know what happened. The one major event that had happened before that was in 1982 in Hama, where, you know, that had been preceded by some attack on fresh recruits in Aleppo, army recruits, and they were all butchered by the Muslim Brotherhood. And then after that, this major event took place in Hama, where you're right, many people, some people say 2,000, some people say 10,000 were killed, and the entire neighborhoods were razed to ground. That incident happened during the regime of Hafiz al-Assad, the father of the current president. The current president, during the current president's term, the kind of incidents you are mentioning did not, at least had not come to our notice before March 18, 2011. I had gone around freely in the country. I don't think I came across a single person who complained. Of course, they had complaints about some rules, laws, difficulties in doing commerce with outsiders, etc., but nothing on this sort of crackdown on the opposition. The crackdown started only in 2000, after this started. I mean, after the trouble started in March. Even there is a lot of exaggeration from the media. I don't want, since I'm told it will be up on, it'll be put on the website of the institute. I don't want to take names, but I can tell you, even Western diplomats who were posted there did not agree with what was being reported in the media. The number of deaths were much less than what was being reported in the media. And you mentioned about 500,000 deaths. I don't know which period you're referring to. I presume in the last 10 years. Okay, now, number one, the 500,000 may not be correct. It may be closer to 3.5 lakhs, or 350,000 or something, but these are minor details. We can ignore it. But what should be recognized is, I was there for about 19 months or so after the trouble started. Of the people who were killed, about 45% were army people or intelligence people or government people, people like this. Tell me, if it is a peaceful protest being crushed, how is it that so many people from the government side died in the clashes? As I told you, this is not just my own assessment, but the assessment of people in this one. Number two, even 2 days back or 3 days back, I was watching a program in which somebody had said, the artillery was being used against civilians, etc., in Dara, blah, blah, blah. I mean, various places in 2011. I can tell you a Western military attaché told me personally that the first time artillery was used was in February 2012 in Homs. But before that, hundreds of times, all the media had reported about use of artillery, which is not correct. I had known about it, but the point is, when it is confirmed by somebody whose country is in the forefront of what is happening, of supporting the opposition, I suppose one can take it at face value. You referred to Mr. Kofi Annan. Yes, he was appointed as special envoy for Syria. This is after Mr. Dabi. The Arab League appointed a mission first that was led by General Dabi. And he completed his mission. And after that, the UN sent a mission under Mr. Kofi Annan. Now, since you are mentioning about General Mood, let me tell you, once we had a meeting with General Mood. When I say we, it is the BRICS countries plus Czech Republic. This was Russian ambassador's residence over lunch, and he had come with a couple of his colleagues, senior, the number two on the political side, number two on the military side, had come to meet us. You won't believe, he opened the meeting by saying that it is very clear that Assad has to be part of the solution. Which completely floored us. I thought he was going to say that you should go, or this should happen, that should happen. But this was what he told us. And Kofi Annan also realized that the opposition is not exactly peaceful. Opposition is more violent than the government. So what does one do? Now, again, there's a misunderstanding about the involvement of certain countries. Some people saying that, the country in which you're residing came into the picture only after it took a turn, after it took a sectarian turn, much later, 8 months, 10 months later or something. But that has been set at rest recently by the American ambassador who used to be there. He said President Obama was under pressure from Saudis to announce publicly, to say publicly that Assad should go. This was in July, August 2011, much before what others say. I mean, Saudi involvement was acknowledged by others. And I had met personally the Saudi ambassador in June 2012, early 2011. And it was very, very clear from him that, what is going on has the full support of the Saudi government. So it was all, it was all a muddled sort of a situation there. And as far as, before that period is concerned, I had no problem in dealing with anyone because there was no serious complaints against the regime, and whatever was happening was internal to them. And they were very, very open in dealing with us, very, very open in sharing information with us. So we had no problem. After that also, they're open in sharing information with us, yes, but not to the same extent as earlier in terms of, sharing details about security casualties. Let me, Sanjay, I'll take half a minute more about one incident. This was a major incident in Jashr al-Shagur. I think it was in June 2011, when the security forces were surrounded by a set of rebels, armed rebels, who shot each one of them. Okay, now the story being put out was that people, Assad's forces, many of them want to defect, and when they were trying to come out, they were shot. Okay, this was the story put out by them, but later, of course, I heard from the local people as to what happened, but anyway, let me keep it out. 300 people were killed in that operation. People who were holed up there, people who were sent to rescue them, all of them were killed. And not a single casualty on the other side. How do you explain it? And, this sort of a thing was happening repeatedly. So with the result that, one had to sort of try to get as much facts as possible to come to a judgment. And yes, it poses a very serious moral dilemma. You asked me, how do you deal with a dictatorial government? Yes, it's a very serious dilemma for me. Unfortunately, I've served in many countries which are disturbed. And he read out Colombo. I was there at the height of trouble. Kathmandu at the height of Maoist agitation. Earlier, Kabul. You can imagine what my experience had been. So it's a difficult dilemma whether one can sort of endorse what the government is doing. I am not endorsing, but even not saying anything about it in very strong terms. Is it right? All that we have said was there's no military solution to the problem, and the solution, political solution, has to be Syrian-led process. Okay, but the point, how can I ignore the fact that from the opposition, there's a whole lot of violence taking place aimed at the government? I still can't, hear the bullet shots which had happened right in front of, where I was going. This is, it's that sort of sophisticated weapons even the Syrian army didn't have at that time. So, it's not a very clear-cut situation. Yes, as a diplomat, whether the local government leadership is, dictatorial, or we deal with everyone. We recognize the state. Okay, whatever happens inside is their own business. It's an internal matter. Didn't we deal with Musharraf in Pakistan? Is he a Democrat? We have dealt with a whole lot of people in the neighborhood and also abroad, but only because we deal with the state. And whomsoever is the leader there, we deal with him because he represents the state. And if he is a duly constituted government, yes, we will deal with him.
Ambassador Haran, we have a number of questions. With your permission, and Professor Kumaraswamy's permission, we'll extend it a little bit.
Okay.
The next question is from Dr. Meena Singh.
Yes.
Meena, would you unmute yourself? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Basically, what I want to know is much has been discussed, sir. It's always pleasure to listen to you, whether I was in IDSA or even otherwise. Uh, for me, I think history is to learn and to correct ourselves and to move forward. That's how I look at history. For me, I think there's much more which India can do, and particularly when we are looking at helping the people of Syria. Now, this is where I want your views, and particularly three sectors that I'm looking at: education, health, and infrastructure building. What, in your views, are you happy with the status that we are in, or there is much more that we can do in these three sectors? That is one. The second is, what are the challenges in the future, if we really try to do it? And I do understand that the private sector would be willing to go. I mean, you have a better idea of how it works or not works. But during my, interactions with some of the Syrians who I met in, Middle East and UK, I got a sense that, there are a lot of opportunities for India, but India is not willing to take risks the way China takes. Not to compare, India with China, but there are many, and particularly in the NGOs where, India can be much more active. This is something which I heard from the Syrians who are not sitting in Syria, but outside Syria. So I'll stop here. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. About education, yes, as I mentioned, we doubled the scholarships under ITEC from 45 to 90 during President's visit. We also established the IT center, which is supposed to be a major development. It should have sort of imparted IT skills, advanced IT skills to Syrian students. We are reviving that now. About infrastructure, yes, we can do a lot more, but I think for that to happen, we need to be clear that the situation has stabilized. Otherwise, there's no point in our going and doing something and that being blasted by somebody else a few days later, a few months later. It's pointless. But pharmaceutical area, yes, we can do something. I don't know whether Syria has officially requested. Possibly they're getting vaccines from Moscow, so there may not be much of a demand for Indian vaccines there. But Indian medicines, Indian exporters used to visit Syria often during my time, and we had no difficulty in getting approvals from Syrians for this because they rated our pharmaceutical products very highly, both in terms of cost and in terms of its efficacy. I mean, their efficacy. So there was no problem at all in cooperation in the medical field with this one. Yes, the extent of involvement of India is less, but tell me which other country they are involved so much in. I mean, it's not as though they have indefinite resources that they can focus on countries outside India, particularly when the situation is not stable. Last Damascus International Fair, I believe, was attended by a whole lot of companies from India. In fact, the last two Damascus International Trade Fairs were attended by a lot of Indian companies, which indicates the interest of Indian companies in involving themselves in projects in Syria. So let's hope it will move forward. I think for that, there has to be some semblance of normalcy or stability in that place.
Thank you. May I now invite Dr. Mudassir Kamar to ask his question.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir, for your very a very eloquent presentation. I think for young researchers like us, it was very important to understand how the process unfolded and everything. If I remember it correctly, in 2011, and you also mentioned we abstained from the UNSC resolution on Syria. And in 2012, we voted in favor of the Arab League-backed resolution. So, I mean, what was the thinking? How did this change in our position or approach come about?
Thank you. Initially, the resolution was one-sided. Okay, and there were apprehensions that it's a sort of a resolution similar to, I think, 1973 or something on Libya, which was used, rather misused, to start an aerial bombardment campaign against Libya and also to work for the overthrow of the regime. So, after having seen its effect in Libya, nobody had the stomach to go with a resolution like this. So it was not as if we abstained from voting. It was, the resolutions that sort of circulated. So Russia and China clearly indicated they will veto any such resolution because it's not balanced. And we also conveyed that we also will not be able to support the resolution. Okay, if it had come to voting, maybe we would have abstained. Okay, but we clearly made it clear that we will not be able to support the resolution, because of it the resolutions are never tabled. But as I mentioned, it was at India's initiative, Indian PR's initiative, the first statement on Syria by UN Security Council was issued on 3rd August 2011, which is a lot more balanced document, balanced statement, which is what prompted Russia and China to come on board. And of course, full credit should be given to Mr. Hardeep Puri. He worked on it tirelessly. But later, you're right, in February, we changed view because of the deteriorating situation there, and because of our own assessment of the situation as to what would be in the interest of the people of Syria. That is much more important than all that is, all the politics being played out there.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have a question from Lakshmi now. Would Lakshmi want to ask a question herself? Lakshmi, unmute yourself and.
So she said that mic has a problem. Probably could
Okay.
leave it.
The question is, what challenges do Indian diplomats face in terms of functioning of the MEA and communication between South Bloc and embassies? Are there set procedures, or one has to function at personal levels? For instance, how much, say, Indian embassy in India would have in deciding India's stand on the Syrian crisis?
Oh, thank you. It's an interesting question. As far as, incidentally, you're asking to the wrong set of MEA officials. Mr. Sanjay Singh was secretary, is dealing with Syria when I was ambassador in Syria. Anyway, particularly during this period, we have, of course, set means of communication, but in situations like this, we go well beyond that. We go well beyond that in terms of reporting, in terms of seeking approval, in terms of doing something and expecting the ministry to approve, which Sanjay very kindly did, without any questions being asked. So it is a very, very sort of smooth coordination between the ministry and the embassy. We had absolutely no trouble at all. And the ministry went mostly by what I was reporting from this one about the ground situation, not by what the media was reporting. That is very important. If after listening to me, the ministry still thinks that what is happening in Syria is quite different from what I'm reporting, that's a big problem. In fact, that happened to poor Philippines ambassador. And he was told that, your report is not in line with what the international media is reporting and what CIA is reporting. And poor chap was called back. I mean, he was asked to return to Manila. So that sort of a situation never arose, for us. And the ministry was fully, kept informed almost on a real-time basis on what is happening there. And they valued our assessment, our judgment on these issues.
Thank you. And just to add that we consider all our embassies as our eyes and ears, and we depend on them enormously in making our assessment. We have a question from Nina now, and Nina, would you please ask your question yourself?
Yes, thank you. My question was partially answered by the Singh question, but I will ask it. I would like to know whether India will be interested in being part of reconstruction projects in Syria. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I didn't get the question. The voice was not clear. Whether India would be interested in?
And being part of reconstruction projects in Syria. Thank you.
Yes. Yes, there's no doubt at all. We would certainly be interested in, being involved in reconstruction projects in Syria. And that's the indication that I get from our ministry people. But the extent of involvement will not be the same thing as as one would. I mean, as say the Gulf countries or something. So totally differently. But in principle, yes, we will not have any objection to involving ourselves in reconstruction. The precondition for that is the situation has to stabilize.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ambassador Haran, for this interaction. I think it has been very useful for this audience, especially the young researchers and students who are here, to hear from first-hand experience of an Indian ambassador from a critical zone. May I now hand over the floor to Professor Kumaraswamy. And before that, let me thank the audience for being here and thank MEI for holding this interaction. Thank you very much, Ambassador Haran.